With new all-time highs almost daily for Bitcoin, barely putting in a correction over the last 6 months of upside gains, gaining over 200% in this period. The big question on everyone's mind is, when are we going to see a correction? Now, I've got some fantastic data that you guys are absolutely going to love in today's video, but let's not get too excited. We're not calling for a correction today or tomorrow. Let's just take a look at the data and enjoy the facts from the charts. At your home of macro cycle analysis, covering Bitcoin, cryptos, the stock markets, and of course, real estate. I've got something for everyone in today's video. Let's kick it off with a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Smashing this thing to 400,000 for 2024. Let more people understand what is going on in these markets as we approach it from a holistic standpoint. I've got some more data, as I said, coming up later to have a look at potentially where the end of the cycle could be as well. But first, let's start with what's going on. Just looking at the market sentiment. A couple of days ago, Michael Saylor bought some more BTC. People go ballistic for this. Doesn't stop at just us degenning on Twitter either. You've even got rapper Drake here posting about Michael Saylor's Bitcoin. I can't believe we're seeing this sort of stuff now, but I guess on the same side of the token, we can almost believe that we're seeing it now as we head into new all-time high prices. So for me, this is a bit of a gauge on the market sentiment at hand. There is no way Drake would be posting about this 12 months ago. Literally to the day now, that was the bottom of the banking crisis for the S&P, the Dow Jones, the NASDAQ, many markets around the world. March 13th was the bottom, and the market has not seen lower prices from that particular day. That's something that we've been talking about here on the channel for a while now, just based on the 18.6 year cycle. We've seen markets head up out of those lows of March 2023, October 2023, October 2022, March 2020. You can start to see a bit of a similarity here about when lows like to come into the markets. Now, we're finding ourselves in March now. It doesn't have to be every year that we see lows in March and October, but I do have some pretty interesting stuff coming up for Bitcoin and in terms of the monthly turning points for BTC. So Michael Saylor's been buying some more Bitcoin, posting about it on Twitter. Drake is talking about it over on Instagram. We're also seeing interest rates shift. It was only in yesterday's video that we were looking at interest rates, or the possibility of interest rates not getting cut anywhere near as much as what the masses had anticipated. The reason for this is that markets have been going up. Asset prices have been increasing. Your Bitcoins, your real estate prices have been increasing, and prices of everyday household goods, our rents, everything has been going up. And so to combat this sort of inflation of prices increasing, you probably wouldn't want to see interest rates being cut at the aggressive rate that they had suggested even just last year. Now, I've got a post on this on Twitter from January, now 2 months ago, where these interest rates are cut almost every single month for the year of 2024. Basically, every single meeting is there's about 8 meetings in the year for the Fed. Now, we've seen them shift to the right, meaning that there is going to be less cuts of interest rates. And just yesterday's video, actually, we had 4 cuts for 2024. Come to today, and it looks like we have 1, 2, 3 cuts now for 2024. So this is going along the lines of basically against the herd. The huge majority had thought that we're going to see 7 or 8 cuts in 2024, and it was basically every single meeting we're going to see a cut. Then it was 4 yesterday. Now it's down to 3 today. And basically my theory has been that we'll probably see far less cuts. And in some cases, as I've talked about before on the channel, from other theories here from Jason Shapiro, is that maybe we'll even see an increase in interest rates. I know it sounds crazy, but you're already starting to see that trend shift to the upside, yet the markets are also going up in the face of interest rates, potentially even just remaining at where they currently are at your 5.25% to 5.5%. But does that mean the markets are going to collapse? Doesn't seem like that when you look at the data. Now, this one here is something that our friend of the channel, Seth, posted back in January. We were looking at this back then, essentially looking at how the years pan out once you see an up year after a down year. 2022, clearly a down year. We all know about that now, basically down to the low in October. 2023, it was an up year in the face of everyone else thinking it was going to be a recession. Definitely didn't turn out anything like that. Market was up. So what happens once you see a down year and then an up year? The next year's returns, typically 86% of the time, is going to be positive. So it's typically going to be up 86% of the time. What's the median? It's about 13%. As for the S&P 500, 13% from the beginning of this year, which started out roughly around 4,700 points, 13% would leave us 5,300 points. So we're not far off that right now. I think this is going to be probably a bigger year than that. Even if we see some corrections throughout the year, I think we'll probably exceed the median just looking at the statistics here. Now for some price targets for the longer term. We're in all-time high territory. The theory goes that we're going to continue to grind away with potentially single digits, maybe at an extent a double digit here and there for the bull market. Once the market breaks past its all-time high, this is for the S&P 500, typically we just see the grinding effect going up and up and up, potentially rotations from one sectors to other sectors, big money's taking some profits along the way, but they have to put it somewhere else. As you guys suggested on yesterday's video, they were going to put it into Bitcoin, as we saw billionaires selling out of their positions, but I don't think they're going to be doing that, unfortunately, for the majority of us. I think they're going to be either holding it, doing something else with it for their own businesses or their own personal lives. But at the end of the day, the markets continue up. You've got these higher lows forming all the way and new higher prices getting put in. Even if we do start to see some sort of single digit or low double digit corrections, the grind is still on the way up. Now, for those price targets, I'm using the range here from the COVID bottom to the top down to the October low. So a very, very significant range for the market. It got stopped at the 50% level very, very briefly, which is 4,800 points, the previous old all-time high as well. And from there, the next targets are roughly around 5,400, 100% of that move from the low. So this connected to the bottom and extended again would take us to about 6,100 points. So you saw how we did that recently with the move out of the March low to the July top projected from the October low. So it came out to somewhere over 5,000 points. We've hit that, and now the market continues up. So looking for something a little more macro here. That doesn't mean we go straight up to these points. I hope you realize that, as we've talked about, the grinding effect and single digit corrections along the way. Along with the NASDAQ as well, similar sort of thing going on for the NASDAQ, looking towards 18,600 as a potential area of some sort of resistance. But overall, I'm probably looking more towards 21,300 points for the NASDAQ, as I'm looking at this range here projected off the October low, and you saw some resistance at the 50% level. So that to me is telling me that this is probably around that range that the market is going to be using moving forward, 18,600, bringing us up to 21,300. So let's dig into Bitcoin and that data, looking at these projected timeframes for potential turns and the possibility of what happens later in this cycle. Now, we're still sitting in its extreme greed today. Yesterday was also extreme greed. Again, hovering around this 80 level on the reading. As we know from history with the market sentiment, it can remain at these levels for an extended period of time, and any sort of move out of these levels may bring a higher low in the market. So we could experience some very volatile shift from extreme greed down to fear, somewhere fear or neutral, yet the price chart may just put in a higher low and then continue on its charge. That's essentially what happened through this period here in 2020, 2021. You can see the extreme greed. That was around your December, January as the market broke out. Big volatile flush, another flush, and then may happen there. But during this period, the market was going up, putting in higher lows, and then eventually started to roll over in May, putting in that bottom, and then the market took off again for the top in November. As for the Google Trend search word over the last 30 days, the term Bitcoin has been cooling off for those last several days now. We've gone from the 5th of March, that was the peak there, and in terms of the BTC chart, right around here, that is your extreme dump from $69 down to $59,000. That caused the big search volume, and now we're seeing that just drop off a little bit from here. So that's over the last 30 days. In terms of the last 90 days, also seeing something similar. We're getting a drop off in volume. The last day, again, 5th of March, taking it back to 12 months now. So let's see how we're comparing to 12 months ago. Still at all-time highs. That's the highest search volume we've seen over this week and last week for BTC. But if we take it back 5 years, encapsulating the previous bull market and bear market bottoms through here, we're still about halfway up to that search volume. So that search volume really started to get some peaks happening around January as we were breaking out into those new fresh highs up around 30K. The new highs were around November, December, and then we got into those really peaky times in January, bit of a cool off, and then that next big pump was on the search volume was in May when the market dropped off. We had 20,000 people on live on YouTube here, and people were sort of freaking out thinking that it was all over. Now, it was pretty scary time, but we saw the bottom pattern forming, had a couple of months off, and then the market started to rise again into that final peak, which was far less exciting for the search terms. And I want to remember that as we move forward into the Bitcoin data here, and how over that period, there was still a couple of months off where things just went a bit quiet. People didn't really know what was going on and whether this was going to be the end or we had another leg to the upside. Keep that in mind as we move into this data. Now, I'm still very, very bullish on the markets. There's no real signs that the market is going to top right now. So there could still be more upside. There can still be further targets past $73,000 up towards 80, as I'll show you in just a moment. Now, I put out this recently. Where do you think max pain is for Bitcoin right now while it's 70 grand, so roughly around 70? Many are thinking max pain is to the upside. I know what you're about to say. Well, if everyone's thinking that, then it's going to be to the downside. But just keep in mind that this is my audience here on X, which means you guys are possibly thinking more along the lines of the data that I'm showing you as opposed to what the general masses are thinking. And now if the masses are typically thinking that they want to see a pullback here because it's just so high, well then max pain is probably going to be to the upside. So everyone's waiting for this pullback. How far? We don't know. But if they're waiting for that, well, the pain's probably going to be to the upside because then you're going to have to jump in and basically catch the bull as it continues up. Now, in the short term, the bull is still intact. We're seeing some higher prices here. It's $72,000. Monday, we did the live stream, and essentially Bitcoin on the short term, on the hourly chart here, very short term, has been getting rejected at the 50% level of only just the daily trend here. So the bottom at 59 to the top at 70, projected off the other daily low here at 67. Basically gives you that 50% point at 72,300. So I think once BTC can get over the 72.3, we should see a little bit more of an easier climb to the next round numbers, your 74s, 75s, maybe even 76. Now, it's only natural that you would see some sort of selling going on, especially as we head into new, fresh, all-time high prices, especially from those who have been buying at the lows. And for some of us who have also been holding since the bottom here, or even getting back in at 2017 at these prices, or even earlier, you're going to be up some pretty significant returns. So why not take a few gains from there, even if that crowd thinks it's going to 500 or $1 million? I think, and you know my point here, it's probably very unlikely that we see those prices in this particular cycle. But I want to show you is what may be a little bit more enticing for this particular cycle. Now, in terms of any corrections, I've said that before, trends are still up, market's still up, not trying to call any particular tops. Safe areas for corrections are still anything really above the levels of the complacency bounce at 48, the ETF hype pump before the crash around 48, 49. So anything down to that level of 48K would still be relatively fine, healthy for this stage of the cycle. That does not mean that we're going to get to those prices. It's just looking out for an if-then. If we got to that price and it fell lower, then the market's in a lot of trouble. If we get to that price and the market holds out and starts to put in higher lows from there, above 48, then we're going to be okay. That's how we have to look at the markets now. We don't know what happens on the black side of the screen. We need to understand that we have to be ready to pivot and shift. But as long as we know where the strength and the weakness lies when tides turn, then we're going to be set up for success come the next move that we have to make in the market. I know many just want to hold out and just say price is going to get to here and that's when I sell. That is a gambler's mindset. That's what gamblers do. They have no plan apart from price gets to here and then I'll sell. And typically what they do is once the price gets to that level, they say, well, how much more can I squeeze out of this? What if it gets here? What if it gets here? And they just keep holding and holding. That's essentially what a gambler does. You're hopefully not a gambler. You need to be prepared for what if the market goes down and what if the market goes up. How do I tell if one is strong and one is weak? That is going to set you up for long-term success, not like these degenerate gamblers who just hope for higher prices. So I've gone through a lot of the macro to do with the markets, looking at interest rates and how that could be a positive to the market. We've looked at the S&P 500 and how that continues to climb. We've looked at the NASDAQ and how that continues to climb as well. We're still in a macro bull market. Real estate continues up. The economy continues up. We potentially see those interest rate increase or at least stabilize rather than all of the cuts that they were all predicting from 2023 to happen in 2024. So that leads us to BTC now, just looking at some of these turning points in the market and where this thing might correct in terms of time and price. And I also want to include as well, if I can make this thing even bigger, what about the end of the cycle? Now stick with me here, we've got a lot to get through. We're looking at monthly turning points for Bitcoin during the cycle and at the end of the cycle. Where are we now? We're in March, but we're also looking at April, as I'll show you in just a moment. So I've got some turning points here for the during the middle-ish of the cycle and basically the end of the cycle. Let's start back at the beginning here, at 2010, when we were at 1 cent and the big pump to $32 for BTC. That turn happened in June. The end of the cycle happened in November, December, and we had another turn happen in April after a pretty significant move to the upside, breaking past previous old all-time highs. Does that sound a little bit familiar? I think it does. And I'm going to keep this in mind as we move forward to where we currently sit, because we still have the old tale of the left and the right translated cycle happening. I'm starting to lean towards the possibility that we're going to see a top in this left side, and many are on the thinking that that's going to be the end of the cycle and it's all over from that point. Good night, Bitcoin. 3 years, it's all over. Come back in 3 years' time. That sort of mindset. I feel like that is potentially going to start kicking in. But remember what we follow here. We follow the 18.6-year cycle, and I'm not saying that Bitcoin runs up into 2026. There has to be big corrections along the way. So where we currently sit, we've got June, April, somewhere in the mid of the cycle. And then we have November at the end. Next cycle for 2017 top, we have June, March. I'm including that here because that was quite a significant move. At that time, China banned Bitcoin and basically things flushed out, and then you got to move to the top. December was the peak there. Now we have, this is June here. That was a run up into June. Then we also had a run up into April for a new all-time high. Then we had a significant pullback, took several months, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then we started to break out on the 6th month into that top on the 7th month there. So that's the 7th from the top, but from the bottom, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, okay? There is your November top. Now this cycle, we've seen a top-ish on April and then another one in June, July. This bar here is June. It topped in on the 23rd. It went sideways for a bit, then one tiny day up, and then the market came back from that point. So I'm looking at June and July. If you took an average of that, it's somewhere early July as well. So we can either count this or both. Somewhere in the middle is still going to put you out around May. But nonetheless, there was a top in April after a very significant surge in March. And well, then the market rolled over. These were very emotional events at the time. They don't look like much on the chart now, but at the time, if you sat through that, it was like Bitcoin had to go back down. There was no chance for it, and we were going back past $15,000. So that's the importance of that. Now we come to today, and I've got even more data to get through, so hold your horses. We're in March. Maybe we head up into April. We've got a few more weeks to go, so it's sort of running on some fumes here to see if we can get there, of course. We are up 6 straight months, which I'll get to in some other data. But as we look back over the course of history here, you can see that we've had some tops around the middle of the year. So quarter two, June is quarter 2, April, quarter 2, June, quarter 2, March, quarter 2, June, quarter 2, April, quarter 2, April, June, call it quarter 2. What do you think? Do you think we get a turn in Q2 of 2024, especially after we've been up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? We're into our 6th month now to the upside. That to me would be a perfect place for the cycle narrative to play out, that we're getting a left translated cycle. That's it. You've missed your chance. Show's over. It's done. Come back in 3 years' time. That's the sort of mentality I think will play out from that point, and that will be another good time to accumulate. But remember, there is a possibility that I'm wrong here. There is an absolute possibility that I'm wrong here. And what you would need to learn is, where does that low come in? Do we start to break down past this key level, somewhere around that $42,000 to $48,000? Of course, 48 is going to be the first part we look. I think if Bitcoin breaks down under that, sure, left translated cycle, game over, go to bed, come back in 2 or 3 years' time, see what happens from that point. So I'm not ruling out a left. I'm not ruling out a right. We have to keep it all in play. Otherwise, we end up like those fools from 2021 that thought Bitcoin had to get to 300,000 and they weren't going to sell until it got there. Same deal at the bottom, that some people listen to those other major idiots online that were calling for $9,000 Bitcoin and 3K and 12K, and they weren't going to buy until that point. We have to be flexible in our positions in the market, and we have to be flexible on our views, but have some in mind in case what happens. Just know where the strength and the weakness lies. Underneath this level, weak; above it, strong. So that's what I'm looking at here in terms of the months for Bitcoin and these turns. It seems like there is a good strong case that we could see that mid or Q2 potential turn coming up, which then leads to the end of the cycle somewhere around a Q1 or a Q4. So Q4 end of 2024 or Q1 2025 could be a reasonable possibility for a top for BTC after that particular move. Maybe this happens in March in the next couple of weeks and it sort of just misses Q2. Nonetheless, you get the idea of what we're looking at here, especially when I get to the other data about how many months up we are and the likelihood of what happens next. So if that is to occur, let's have a look at the previous cycle, 2013. A lot of us are looking at this 2017 cycle of how Bitcoin is progressing. Sure, we got a turn here in March. Then you had April, and then the market took off again May, June, pullback in July, etc. So we are tracking similarly to 2017, but we could also be tracking similarly to this particular move. So this move into the end. You've got an April peak in 2013, and then the market goes quiet for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months, starts to break out on the 6th, and finishes in the 7th, or if you wanted to call it the 8th here, December. The top was about the 30th of November. So call it November, December. That's why I've got it written there on the chart, essentially right at that point there. So you've got this period here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 months of accumulation. Not saying that has to happen this time that we get 5 months of accumulation, but just note that there was some big moves to the upside. These bars don't look like it, but you're going from $30 to $300, so a 10x move in a couple of months, and then the market had to cool off from there. Note how it cooled off. The cooling off came back and stayed within the pump up bar. So you can see this last bar here to the top. All of that accumulation happened within the same price range of this bar. It also happened above that bar, obviously, because that bar was lower. So I'm keeping in mind a couple of different monthly price ranges here. Along with that, you've got a higher low forming, which then formed another higher low into the peak. Along with that, it was above the previous tops. Now, if it happened to come back to these levels, I would still consider that pretty all right, back into the previous zone of that last top. That's essentially what I'm looking at here. If Bitcoin came back and accumulated above 48K. Now, it might not get there. It could be somewhere a bit higher, but essentially I'm just planning for the future in case something like this happens above the levels, depending on how high we shoot, or something like this happens below the previous all-time high, but above some of the other previous resistance levels. So there is your left translated cycle, which is developing into a right translated cycle. That's the point that I'm trying to make here, why we have to keep an open mind about what happens next in the cycle, because the show's not over until the fat lady sings, and the fat lady in this case is Bitcoin, I assume. But essentially, it doesn't mean the show is over if we see a top and then the market corrects from that point. We've only seen a couple of these big moves to the upside, which leads me to the monthly statistics for BTC in terms of moves to the upside and the ending of the cycle. Keep all this in mind, that things can change along the way, and that's the whole idea about the markets. No one has an exact plan, an exact overlay of how this occurs, and you're going to play it to a T. It just doesn't happen. What we have are the probabilities. So what I'm looking at here, we have 58 monthly swings in this particular chart here, so the Bitcoin Liquid Index. And in terms of moves themselves, I've laid them out into 5 months or more in the same direction of the trend using the swing indicator here, 6 or more, or 7 or more. Now, if you want to learn more about this swing indicator, there is a link in the top of the video description, along with TIA Premium, where you'll get more of this info in greater detail and learn how to use it for your long-term trading and investing throughout Bitcoin, throughout the stock markets, and of course, the real estate cycle as well. So you can make some informed decisions about your own trading plans. With that in mind, let's continue on with the data here. So for BTC, these moves to the upside are very rare. 6 straight months, higher highs, higher lows without a swing in the chart. 6 months or more has happened 8 times out of the last 58, giving us a reading of 13.8%. So 14% of the time this occurs. What if we were to get to the next month, 7 months after? If April was to go higher than where March was, we still have another 2.5 weeks to go, but that would then drop us down to 6.9%. Basically, only 4 times in Bitcoin's history has this occurred that we see 7 months in a row. So basically bring it down to 7%. So this, along with the data that I'm looking at here for potential mid-cycle turns, essentially before the end of the cycle, you can see we've got quite a lot of Q2 turns happening. March, let's throw March in there, but essentially I'm looking at sort of that April or June period. So we throw this data thinking that, well, there's a very high possibility that we get to that point for BTC, whether this month or next month. If we were to get there next month, the statistics just drop way out of space here. It only happens 7 out of 100 times, so 7% that we would see that. To get to 8, some cycles we don't even see an 8-month move. Last cycle we didn't even see 8 months in one direction. The cycle before that we saw 1 with still 4 to 5 months of consolidation within that period. So there was 10 months from that point there. Going back to the previous cycle, there was really only 1 time coming out of that low there. This is 9 months here. So it happens very, very, very infrequently that we would see anything more than 7 months to the upside. Once you get beyond that 7 months, there's like 2 times in history that it's happened. Now, there is still 2 times in history that it's happened, so maybe this is the 3rd time that it happens. But we're just playing with probabilities here, looking at the streak of months in a row, coupled with where these tops have come in, and you start to squeeze that probability that it's got to be somewhere around now or next month that you'd at least see some sort of correction in the market as we've gone this far already. And I definitely hear those guys, if they've stuck around this long, saying, but everyone said it all along the way, there's going to be some sort of correction. Sure, that's the case. That's why it's always important to continue trading with the trend. If the trend is up, just stay with the trend. Don't try and time these turns. What we're doing here is just getting an understanding of what might come next, and then having a reading of, is it going to be strong or is it going to be weak? Has it happened before? Is it out of the ordinary for it to happen? This is what tells us that, to keep us hopefully on the right side of the market. So we've got that data. Now, on to the next thing. 5 months or more per cycle. When have we seen 5 month moves in a cycle? How often do they happen? In 2013, we had 3 in the bull market, 1 in the bear market. For the 2017 top, we had 3 in the bull market, 1 in the bear market. For the 2021 top, we had 5 in the bull market. You had 6 months here, 6 months down, but it was still in the bull market. You had 6 months up. Then you had a 7 or so months up here. There it is. Yep, 7. And then you had 5 months up. So a lot of those moves were very long, streaky moves, and that gave us 5. So far, we've seen 1. Now, does that mean we have to see at least 3? Of course not. But it seems likely that we would see at least more than 1 of these types of moves. Now, if we are to see more than 1 of these types of moves, we've seen this so far, we're at 6, maybe we see 6 or 7. If we're to see more, maybe, just maybe, something like 2013 happens. Big move to the upside. Everyone's in on it. As I said earlier on, Michael Saylor's buying more. Rappers are talking about it. We've still got positive stuff going on throughout the rest of the market. And if you remember my S&P videos about how the S&P may have pullback, or whenever the S&P pauses, then that typically affects Bitcoin at this earlier stage in the cycle. Maybe we see some sort of consolidation. Now, I've tried to hammer home the importance of where that consolidation happens at the right, above particular resistance, strong, happens below it, weak. That's the important part here when it comes to this next stage of wherever this top comes in. So with that in mind and the possibility of a top, then we can start to build upon that and see where this end stage comes in. Now, I've just got something simple here, just looking at where the all-time high was compared to the breakout for the new all-time high. As you can see from the previous cycle, about 12 months from the top to the breakout. The next cycle back, you've got the December top, and the breakout was roughly around February. You did have a day here where it touched it, but you could say, well, I'm happy to say around 8 months to 10 months from that particular peak, because this is when the market actually started to break out. That was April 17. You had the rejection in March, and then it started to break there. And for the 2013 cycle, somewhere around 9 months. You got a big bar here at 8 months. 9 months touched the broke out from that previous top of June, sort of getting that move on, although that to me is the entire cycle itself. But just in terms of where the market really starts to get ballistic after some sort of consolidation, you could use a number of, say, around 9. So we're looking somewhere around 8, 9, maybe as far out as 12. So if we measure that from now is the top, so we'd have to measure it from March and April. 8 months takes us to about November of 2024. 9 months or 8 months from next month would take us to about December. So it puts us somewhere for a secondary top, somewhere around Q4 of 2024. Could it extend? Well, yeah, we can see there, it might be 12 months. So if we put it out to 12 months, that would bring us out to about April of 2025. So there's a reasonable window there of Q1 to Q2, or Q4 of 2024 out to Q1 of 2025. Maybe a slight extension there, but nonetheless, what we're looking at is the possibility of a top here. Everyone sort of jumped on board that it's left translated, it's all over, but you guys know better. You got to look at where this correction comes in. Hopefully we get some sort of consolidation above those levels, and then we start to see another move towards the end there, towards the end of the year, 2024, maybe early into 2025, which to me also lines up with the 18.6 year cycle, whereas I don't think Bitcoin and cryptos are going to make it all the way to the end of this cycle. They might, hopefully it does, everyone's rich, but if they don't, then those profits are probably going to get thrown into real estate. So if this thing ends sort of end of this year or first half of 2025, there's still another 6 to 12 months left on this particular cycle where everyone jumps out of cryptos and start to throw it into another market. Doesn't mean crypto's over for good. I just think maybe we'll see that peak, it'll die off, and then maybe crypto will have a lower top coming into the peak of this cycle. Then everything comes down together. A long way off. I hope you got a lot out of this particular video. I'm going to come back to this in future videos. I know this one's gone on a lot longer than usual, but I think it's important to try and keep it all together in one video so that you've got a nice reference point to come back to. Now, if you want to learn more, obviously check out TIA Premium. There is a lot in there to go through. Otherwise, subscribe here on the channel. Going for 400,000 subscribers this year. Make sure you share this content with a friend so they can see what's going on in the market. Oh, and I almost forgot price target. Let's at least look towards 100% range, somewhere at $81,000. Now, I did go through this with the S&P and NASDAQ, looking at the extensions, so the low to the high, projected off the low. This is a pretty big time frame over many, many years. And we saw some rejections at 50% level, which makes me think that there is a possibility that we go somewhere around that sort of $80,000, $81,000. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, squeezes everyone out. And then we get that sort of rejection. There's a lot of things that have to come together to get this particular forecast to play out. So, I reserve the right to adjust things along the way. But if we were to see a correction there, back to the previous highs at 69 would basically be about a 16% correction. Coming down to some of those lows around 60K, it would be about a 26 or 27% correction. And then all the way back down to those previous tops at 48, 49 would be about a 40% correction. So all that stuff could happen and it would still be in a stronger position here. That seems a possibility. I've put a lot together. As I said, reserve the right to adjust things as more information comes through. Just looking at the probabilities, which is what I prefer to stick with here, that would lead us to somewhere around this month or next month for some sort of intermediate top. The rest we can worry about as it comes together throughout the course of 2024. Thanks again, guys. Links in the video description. I'll see you guys at the next one. Stay tuned to the markets, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Until then, take care and peace out.